Hey crafters! Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial/review on staining a picnic table. My parents had this picnic table along with some other random items that they wanted stained, and I like to DIY. So they picked up this MinWax PolyShades product, which is both a wood stain and a polyurethane all in one step. Which is super great because this table was unfinished wood, meaning it wasn't stained. And then because it's a table for eating at, the polyurethane will also help seal the table and minimize damage from setting cold or hot beverages on the table or food stains and just general protection from the weather. Now there's two other things you need to know before I walk you through this project. The first is I'm not some expert on staining wood and polyurethane. I'm just an average person basically following the directions on the back of the can, which I think this is actually a great way to test this product because if it works well even if I make mistakes, then it shows that this product is really great and easy to use and friendly enough for anyone to give it a try. The second thing is the stain and poly says to only use indoors. So yeah, the story behind that is I read the instructions on the can before I started and not so much the details about the product, because I just kind of assumed that when my parents handed me the can and said, "Here, you want to paint the table?" that they bought the correct product. However, halfway through the first coat, I noticed it says for indoor use only. This table is outside. Oops. It is, however, on a covered porch, so we will see how this holds up even though it's not recommended for outdoor use. Alright, let's get our materials, shall we? Obviously, you need a can of MinWax PolyShades. This is the stain and poly all in one step in the same can, and the color stain I am using is classic oak with a gloss finish. I'll put a link for this below. You will also need steel wool if you plan to do multiple coats. The can recommends 000 grade, which is finer than 00 grade, but again, this is what my parents picked up for this project, so that's what I'm using. Of course, you will also need the item you are painting and you want it clean and dry. You can use a leaf blower, a broom, or a cloth to get debris off. If it's been exposed to the weather or say food and you need to use a damp cloth to clean off some of the debris, that's an option too, but make sure it is completely dry before you start staining. And last of all, we need our painting materials, like a stirring stick and a paintbrush. And by the way, I don't think I was using a natural bristle brush like the can recommended. I just used a brush from Harbor Freight. Alright, so let's get started. The first step is to stir the stain and poly. This is pretty straightforward. Stir until the color is solid. It takes about half a minute to a full minute. Make sure that you stir gently so you don't spill over the edge of the can and so that you don't whip up a bunch of air bubbles. Next, we need to dip our paintbrush in the can, about an inch up the bristles. Then tap it on the side of the can to remove the excess. They recommend doing very thin coats, and I was probably too thick when I first started. However, I did find it's very forgiving and I still end up with a great finished product. So aim for thin layers, but you won't ruin the project if you are a little thicker than they recommend. Once we've tapped off the excess poly stain, start painting your project. You want to maintain what they call a wet edge, meaning whenever the brush touches the project, it leaves behind some stain. And you'll be able to both see and feel if your brush is too dry. Also, make sure that you paint in the direction of the wood grain. Lastly, stir the poly stain periodically throughout the project so that way your color stays consistent. And that's the basics of getting your first coat on. It might sound a little complicated, but basically you're just painting. Once you complete a section, while the poly stain is still wet, you can run the brush lightly over the stain at a 45-degree angle to smooth out the color and minimize air bubbles. I did this intermittently throughout the project. With my first coat, I also painted the ends of the wood beams and I painted the entire underside of the table, basically every surface of this table. Whether you do that or not is up to you, but be careful because this poly stain can be very sticky and it will stain clothes and your skin if you get it on you. But once I covered the entire table in the poly stain, it was time to let it dry. The can recommends to let the first coat dry for 6+ hours, so I let it sit and then came back the next day for a second coat. When I came back to the project the next day, it was dry and smooth. You may also notice that darker splotch on the top, and that was from when I started and wasn't doing as thin of a coat. Don't worry, the second coat smooths that out. Before painting the second coat, grab your steel wool and gently smooth it down any surfaces you will be adding a second coat to. For me, this is just the top of the table and the top of the benches. Your steel wool will get pretty worn down and that just means it's working. Next, we need to clean the surface of any debris loosened by the steel wool. I opted for a leaf blower and then wiped it off with a dry cloth. Once my surface was prepped for the second coat, I stained it a second time using the same steps as before, let it dry, and then I was done. The finished result turned out so nice, and that second coat minimized the dark spot where I painted too thick. The color is really pretty, and the table now also has a nice smooth shine to it. Even though it's not recommended specifically for outdoor use, this is still more protection than what it started with, so overall I would give this product an A+ because it was easy to use and it turned out as expected. If this video was helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy crafting!